Hello, and welcome to Mild's Culture Plate. I am your host, Mild Kevin Miles. It is Monday, November the 28th, 2022. Welcome, feds and degenerates, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to start off super chill. First off, just a show note. I don't usually stream on Mondays, but I had some extra time today because I went to the doctor. I've got some nerve damage, some nerve issues in my left arm. My left arm has been going numb for a while now, and I'm having it checked out. Got sent home with a prescription. Going to be trying to reduce some inflammation, see if it's not just a pinched nerve. But, had some extra time today. Didn't have to go to the old financial workplace. And here I am. So what I have decided to do is a show about me. Most of my shows are about my beliefs or about politics or what I think about movies, but this one's about me. Because, quite frankly, I've gotten a few questions, mostly about my infatuation with Batman, and I've gotten some, questions about kind of how I fell into this space, and quite frankly, I wanted to give people the opportunity to ask me any question, so this is going to be an AMA. So if you're watching, go ahead and, leave a comment in the chat asking me any question. I'm willing to answer whatever. So if you want to do that, go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and bring the chat into a pop-out window here so I can see them in real time and answer any question you may have. But in the meantime, oh Lord, okay. Hold that thought 1 minute. I'm going to put you just on hold. Going to give you a chair stream. I've got my earpiece in. Going to go around the corner real quick and get some. All right. I knew there was something I was missing, and that was the whiskey of the day. Which we're back to airplane bottles again. Gonna start off with some Glenlivet 12-year. Let's see, 40% alcohol by volume, 80 proof, single malt Scotch Whisky. So we're gonna be trying that out, and then once we get done with that, then I'm gonna switch over and try a little bit of fancy stuff here. Jack Daniel's Tennessee Fire, 35% alcohol by volume, 70 proof, cinnamon liqueur blended with Jack Daniel's Tennessee whiskey. So we're going to be trying out some different whiskeys here. Going to be busting out the fancy, expensive giant bottles. The Glenlivet and the Jack Daniel's Tennessee Fire here on this broadcast. So far no questions coming in on the chat. I'm going to go ahead and crack this bottle of Glenlivet, and then I'll get into a little bit about my history with comic books. Because I'm sure y'all are just dying to hear about my history with comic books. That's a pretty good smelling scotch. Now, I imagine one of these days I'm going to get a bottle of the 14 or 18 year. But for now, this 12 year has a pretty good smell to it. Let's see how the taste and the finish is. So, what am I going to cheers to here? Cheers to good health. I was kind of concerned going into the doctor today that there may be... I'm not on mute, am I? No, I am not, thankfully. Okay, I was a little concerned going into the doctor today that, some of the issues I'm having with my nerve in my arm had to do with either, nicotine overdose or potentially diabetic neuropathy or something. So far, it appears to be just a mechanical issue. If I can't solve it with inflammation drugs, then I'm going to try a chiropractor, and if the chiropractor doesn't work, I'm probably going to go on to a physical therapist. But, at least it's not something serious, lifelong, life-threatening, not my heart condition, not diabetes. So cheers to health. Hopefully whoever's watching this, I know my good fortune, isn't shared by everyone in the audience. So whatever you're dealing with medically or whatever you have going on, cheers to your health as well. Cheers to good health all around. That's a pretty decent scotch. It's got a nice rounded off finish. It's, some of the scotches I've got in there kind of give you a spicy bite at the end. Oh, there it goes. Actually, that one does have it, but it's a little muted compared to some of the scotches I drink. That's pretty good. I actually like that. So yeah, it's a recommend. I recommend Glenlivet 12 year. Okay, so on to the topic of me and my history with comic books. So my first, when I grew up, there were magazines everywhere. Every gas station, every liquor store, every grocery store would have magazine racks. I don't know, I'm saying this because I'm assuming that not everyone out there is as old as me. But if you're older than 30, you probably remember when they had magazine and comic book racks in the grocery store. And the idea of a magazine subscription or a comic subscription was kind of a commitment. And growing up in a financially unstable household, the idea of my parents or my family being willing to jump in with some sort of a commitment, on an ongoing publication. If it wasn't the newspaper, that was a no go. I'm not saying it probably couldn't have happened, but I wasn't the type to ever ask that kind of a financial commitment from anyone in my family. That was a bridge too far. And so then I started getting older. I got into my pre-teen years, and I'd kind of had an off and on relationship with my grandfather, where he was out of my life for a little bit, and then I missed him, so I wanted to start spending a lot more time with my grandfather. And as such, we used to do a lot of walking on the small town square of the town we lived in at the time. And there just so happened to be a comic shop that was right next to an antique shop. And he would like to go to the antique shop and then go across the street to a bowling alley and drink coffee. And while he was drinking coffee, I started, perusing the interesting things at the comic shop. And he was willing to fork over a couple dollars. And so this would become like an every other week thing where I would go hang out with my grandfather and he'd buy me a comic book. And somehow that springboarded into, I was getting an allowance from my parents at the time. And then I would go with my grandfather and he'd buy me one comic and I'd buy myself one comic. And that kind of continued for well over a year. And this was around 1992, 1993. And one of the things about going to the comic shop is I learned about pull lists. Now, I don't know how big pull lists were in 1992. Like, now they're the thing. Like, that's how you get comics. Like, a comic shop knows how to order however many comics because of how much demand they have on their pull list, and then they'll order probably about 10% or so more and determine, is this a popular issue or not. But back then, I don't know how popular pull lists were, but I found out that they did exist back then because my local comic shop actually had the capability of doing a pull list. And I had them pulling not titles, not individual titles, but I had them pulling every comic that had to do with a certain event. And there were 2 events in particular. Now, mind you, that was almost 30 years ago. That was about 30 years ago. And so I don't have any of those single issues anymore. But one of those events was Batman Nightfall. Now, I saw some promo stuff in the comic shop about how, Batman's going to face his most dangerous foe yet. And the idea was he was going to face all of them, right? Because the whole thing started with the jailbreak. They were kind of doing a bait and switch, right? So as part of the marketing, it wasn't really about Bane. Bane was just the catalyst to create this situation where all of Batman's villains are loose at the same time. And does Batman have what it takes to face them all one by, all within a short time period? And so I had them pull all the issues of Batman Nightfall. And then I saw some other promos within the comic shop concerning a very limited 16-issue series. Now, here's the thing. I'm like, hey, 16 issues? That's little over a year, couple bucks a month. That's not much of a commitment. I can commit to that. Let's check this new thing out. And that new thing was a mini-series from Dark Horse Comics that they called Comics Greatest World. And it's since been re-released in this here Dark Horse Heroes Omnibus. And of course, this was more Dark Horse's way of throwing a bunch of new characters at the wall and seeing which ones stick. Now, you may remember there was a movie that came out starring Pamela Anderson called Barbed Wire. Barbed Wire was originally part of the Comics Greatest World lineup. And so they had Barbed Wire, they had Ghost, and they had X. And then they had the Vortex, which all got further series and mini-series after the original Comics Greatest World run. But I signed up for the original 16. That's all I wanted was 16 comics. And of course then it ends with a cliffhanger, so then you have to kind of jump into the Vortex stuff. But anyway, so that was that. And quite frankly, before Vortex got too deep into it, and before we could finish the Nightfall saga with the Night's End run, right? Before any of that happened, my local comic shop unfortunately had to close. And I don't know whatever happened to that comic shop owner, but whatever happened to you, man, I'm thinking about you because Man, if you've ever been a regular at a business and then that business closes up, you kind of wonder, you kind of hope for the best for them and their family, and that nothing too tragic had happened. But anyway, long story short, so I dipped out of comics, right? And then, the 2000s came and they started doing all these movies, right? They did the Dark Knight movies, and quite frankly, Batman Begins is my favorite superhero movie right now. But another superhero movie came out around that era. I won't say around that time. It came out a bit earlier. Superman Returns. In Superman Returns, Superman has a kid. And I thought, man, I didn't like the idea. Like, the whole thing just seemed dumb for a movie. And then shortly after that, I heard that in the comic books, Batman was going to have a biological son. And I was like, why are we trying to give superheroes kids? Like, why do superheroes need to be having kids? This isn't a thing that needs to be happening. Fast forward another number of years, and I had a very serious tragedy in my life where I, quite frankly, needed to get out of my own head for several hours a week because I was taking it kind of hard. And as such, I jumped back into comic books. I had a coworker, in fact, who had been reading much of the Batman runs and much of the DC Comics runs the previous 10, 15 years. And after I'd had a conversation with him, I did a little research, and I recognized that, this was 2016. And I recognized that DC Comics was about to do this Rebirth Initiative, this ultimate jumping in point. This place where everything can begin again in the comics, and they're gonna restore all the heroes to like the best versions of themselves. And it was gonna be so exciting. And they were going to have a limited number. I think they had 26 titles total, but only 13 of those were going to be monthly. I think the other two were like every 2 or 3 months. Or, excuse me, the other half were only every 2 or 3 months. Or no, bi-weekly. Okay, see, there was going to be, I think, 10 to 13 bi-weekly, and the rest of them were going to be monthly. That's right. And so I bought in. I bought into Rebirth. Like, full force. Now, I don't know. I wasn't around. Now, me saying this, obviously, I wasn't around when New 52 was the big hype, fresh, we're going to reboot everything and start from scratch, and this is the ultimate jumping in point. Like, I wasn't familiar with why that was a hype thing, why that was a big thing, and I wasn't familiar with why it seemed to have flopped after only 5 years. But the fact is, I had heard that they'd made radical changes with New 52, that a lot of them were unpopular, and that after 5 years they were really dedicated to hiring the best writers to write the best stories and to start from scratch. And so I bought wholeheartedly into the Rebirth. Scammer trying to call me. Yeah, I know. That's the second show in a row. I need to just start muting my phone. Anyway, so, one of the things, I grabbed a couple of the trade paperbacks from my local bookstore, my local major chain bookstore, And then I was so interested that I had jumped online. I'd gotten some recommendations for some of the other titles because I didn't want to just collect Batman at the time. I wanted to know what else was interesting as far as DC Comics went. And I was given, quite a list of some of the neatest stuff, right? And so I went to the local bookstore. I started reading it. I was interested, so I started going to my local comic shop and looking for trade paperbacks because that's what I wanted. I wanted trade paperbacks. I no longer wanted to go every month and get a single issue. I was able to break it up by release date, where it seemed like every month or two I'd just get another little stack of 2 or 3 trade paperbacks. So going to the comic shop, I saw that they had this poster hanging on the wall. And I asked them about it, and they actually had 3 extras in the back. And so they came out and gave me one. Actually, no, I stand corrected. It was not a poster hanging on their wall. They had one of these in a mat on the surface, like they had a mat covering the surface of their cash registers for the credit card slip, the little spongy mat for credit card transactions. I asked them about it, and they had one. There's a little folding damage, like a little crease from trying to transport it home, but this is one of the things I really like in my collection, because there were some more official DC Rebirth posters, and this isn't it. This was something totally different. It's a different cast of characters, and it kind of, to me, it's official, but it wasn't like the official thing, right? So shortly after I got that, I thought to myself, okay, well, that's interesting. I kind of want a piece to pair with it. Like, I kind of want to be able to put that on one side of one wall and have something opposite of it on a different wall. And so then I bought this baby on Amazon. And, it's huge. I love it. I love it because it's huge. But that kind of started me down this path of what do I want as far as collector's items. I'm not a statue guy, right? I'm not a spend $300 on something that's just going to sit there kind of guy. Even with comics, like if I'm going to buy a comic, if I'm going to spend $200-$300 on a comic, I'm going to read it till it's beat up. A lot of these have damage because I've taken them back and forth to my job. I've read them on the bus. I've read them in the car. I've read them anywhere and everywhere. So these aren't in excellent condition. Most of them are not. I beat them up. Because when I make an investment, I don't make an investment for it to sit and look pretty. They do look pretty, but that's not why I buy them. So, shortly after that, and I'm going to have to tear down my tower here a little bit. Shortly after that, one of the people who I was madly in love with at the time, had wanted to know what I wanted for Christmas. And this here just so happened to be on sale at Barnes & Noble. And if you could tell, these are the Justice League figures, but it's all of their Rebirth costumes. You see, I didn't want old shit. I wanted the current shit. And what I meant by old shit isn't that I didn't have a problem with New 52. I didn't have a problem with post-crisis. And I didn't have a problem with sort of the classic looks of these comic characters. And, you know, since then I've kind of grown out of it. You know, I've gotten stuff like this. I've gotten, you know, the Batman the Animated Series figure. And I've got a bunch of these McFarlane figures. But for the most part, like, Rebirth is still the era of DC Comics I'm still the most interested in. And I don't know if that's just because, you know, that's when I jumped on and I found it to be really good. And really a lot of the stuff they've produced since they ended the Rebirth branding is kind of crap. But I really enjoyed the costumes. I really enjoyed the look of the books. I really enjoyed the storylines they had going on for the most part. And so, you know, I'm reading the comics and I'm kind of collecting these collector stuff. Let's see. And then at some point then we move into a new house, and that's where we're living now. And as such, I wanted to decorate the man cave portion of our home, which is actually the room next to this room. And I had already had this and the other big thing, and I'd had some action figures. Cobwebs. But I needed more. I needed more art. And I saw a little post on Reddit that Hobby Lobby had a bunch of DC Comics wall art. And so, you know, this is I don't know, I think you call it lenticular. Kind of changes a little bit as you side to side. So I got this big old thing at the Hobby Lobby. And I got this little thing also at the Hobby Lobby. And you'll notice, like, it's the same Batman pose. It's the same shit. So, I mean, it is what it is. I kind of hang this one here from the bottom of my bookshelf here. And then that one goes in the other room. So, you know, that's some of my favorite art. I did recently, I went to a comic event that spanned multiple comic book shops in my local area. And I picked up, like I said, I'm not a statue guy, right? I'm not the kind of guy that spends a lot of money on something that just sits there and looks pretty. However, I did have a little bit of extra money to spend. And one of the it's a little dusty. One of the comics I was looking for was not in stock at any of those comic shops. And, you know, I really wanted to show support for one comic shop locally in particular. And they had this Batman Rebirth statue. And like I said, I'm a sucker for merchandise that involves Batman in his Rebirth costume. As such, you know, I've been buying these cheapo Spin Master figures. You know, the big version and the little version. You know, I've been buying those because those are cheap. I managed to find this little tiny thing at a Dollar Tree It's also Batman in his Rebirth costume. Found that interesting. I've never seen anything like this online. Only at the Dollar Tree for $1 frickin'. That was quite the find for me. So, they had all these Batman in alternate costumes. I'm not a big fan of Batman in other, alternate colored costumes. One of the things that drove me nuts when I was a kid is, when Batman the Animated Series came out, I begged my mom for action figures from the Batman the Animated Series, and she got me pretty much every action figure I asked for. And, bless her heart, there was one Christmas that she just dumped a lot of money on me with Batman action figures, and I can't tell you how many hours I played with those things and loved those things. But there was one thing in particular that drove me just up the fucking wall. And that was, they had this Batman the Animated Series figure that was Batman with a parachute. And the motherfucking costume was orange. Like bright fucking orange. Like the kind of orange a highway worker would wear. Like, this is the Dark Knight wearing fucking construction worker orange. Why? And so I've always kind of been annoyed when they throw unnecessary color into Batman's costumes. This one's not too bad. It's all black, but still, the black and the gold, it's still, these aren't my favorite, but I got them anyway because they were cheap. The thing I find really interesting with these Spin Master figures is the different versions of Damien. So you got one with a hood. You got one that's more like Tim Drake's costume. Then you got one that's more of the red and black without the hood. I found it interesting that they released all these different Damien Wayne figures. So right around the time Snyder's Justice League was coming out, I saw that they had this Spin Master figure, Superman in the black suit and beard, and I was all hyped for the Justice League movie about to come out, and I wanted black suit Superman on my shelf. And then more recently, I just wanted something else big. And so I got these giant black suit Batman and Bane. Not really in love with that little figure thing, but it is what it is. Okay, so those are the figures. Those are my figures and my wall art. I'm sure, I have a couple other things. Like I said, I have all this blue suit Batman Rebirth, and I have in the McFarlane, I have a blue suit Batman the Animated Series. Not sure how many of these they made. I'm assuming it's more of a limited run being the blue suit, but yeah, quite interesting. And then I got the 3 Jokers. Batman with the yellow oval. This is the Detective Comics 1000. And then I've got the DC Rebirth Damien Wayne. And then the DC Rebirth Batman. And then up top, this is Batman 66 in black and white. So that rounds out all that shit. That's all the collector's in the wall art, except for that light is very expensive. I first saw that light at a comic shop. The same comic shop that I was talking about with the statue. I saw it there about 4 or 5 years ago, and I was like, oh my gosh, I want that. Because I was like I said, I was collecting all this Batman Rebirth stuff. And having the Batman Rebirth logo on a neon light would be just amazing. And I finally found it on Amazon, and it, a couple $100. And I kind of was tossing around the idea of getting it for a good 6 months, and then I finally bit the bullet and bought it. And then we got the old Detective number 27 tin sign that I snatched off of Amazon as well. So now let's get into comic books. We're 36 minutes in. Let me go ahead and finish my Glenn Levitt here. So I've already kind of mentioned my mother and my grandfather being big influences on big enablers, if you will, with me and my obsession with Batman. And so I just want to give a little toast in remembrance of two of the closest family members I've ever had. I love you. All right. So now, comic books. Probably one of my favorite parts of my collection is it was very difficult. It has been very difficult to collect anything written by Paul Dini. Anything other than animated series focused. Like, that stuff's a little easier to find. But you got Dini's Detective Comics run behind me. But more importantly, Dini's Streets of Gotham run was the continuation of his Heart of Hush from his Detective Comics run. And this was, Bruce Wayne is missing / dead. And so in the mainline comics, Batman is Dick Grayson. Excuse me. Brain fart. And so this is Hush essentially trying to take over Bruce Wayne's identity and what Dick Grayson and Bruce Wayne's loved ones wanted to do about it. Wonderful story. But again, one of the reasons it's so hard to find. So it's become sort of part of the pride of my collection here. Even more so than the No Man's Land up there. I've got the entire No Man's Land saga, starting with Cataclysm in trade paperback form. Now you can kind of find it in omnibus format, but even that's out of print now. So, the No Man's Land, very good story. Omnibus, snatch it up before prices get too insane, especially for the Road to No Man's Land omnibus. If you're interested in Batman at all, make the investment in that omnibus now, because you're about to not be able to find Cataclysm in any format whatsoever. Kind of like you can't find Troika right now in any format, but that's not an important story like Cataclysm is. But yes, Streets of Gotham, if you can find them for a decent price, snatch them and hang on to them. Even if you're not ready for the 2009 runs of Batman, if you don't think you're ready to read those 2009 stories, buy them anyway, put them on a shelf, and wait till you're caught up. So, yeah, these three go alongside with these three. This is Grant Morrison's run. I'm not a fan. Not a big fan. But Grant Morrison was everything Batman at that time, you know, was kind of under the direction of Grant Morrison, because he was ultimately responsible for taking Batman away and bringing him back. And so everything was kind of under his umbrella. And unfortunately, like I said, I think Paul Dini did the best job through that era. So that's one thing that's important to me. You know, I got the entire Nightfall storyline. Let me set a couple of these things aside. Another thing that has been pretty interesting as of late are these 80-year deluxe editions. Now, I've got these. I usually don't store these down here on my bookshelf. These have become sort of my coffee table pieces. And they've had a bunch of them. They started with Batman and Superman. So they've got an Action Comics and a Detective Comics 80-year deluxe edition. And then they kind of, based on the popularity of those two, they kind of kept going and making more and more. And so I've got Robin, and I've got the Joker. I also have the Superman one. I didn't get the Green Lantern. I didn't get the Green Arrow. But there's also a Wonder Woman, which I have not gotten yet. But that was, I believe, the last of them that they printed was the Wonder Woman. And it's still in print, and I've been kind of hesitating on grabbing it, but I think I'm going to be grabbing it here within the next week or two. I'll give you a review if I do. But the interesting things about these 80-year books is they drop like a story from each decade in. So they like this has like the first Batman story, and then it continues with like a Batman from each decade, or very important stories from each decade coming out. And then all the way to current times. I think the last one here is one of the Scott Snyder Batman Eternal stuff. And then Joker's got here, let me just talk about some of them here. Joker's got the Joker's 5-Way Revenge, the Laughing Fish, the first couple Joker stories that there ever were, like Batman versus the Joker and Joker Returns, which Joker Returns was Batman #1. They got an excerpt from The Killing Joke, an excerpt from The Death in the Family. They have a little story by write-up by Paul Dini about who the Joker is. Sleigh Ride, which was written by Paul Dini, which is one of my favorite Robin stories of all time. That's going to be in that Paul Dini Detective Comics run. It's Tim Drake, but it could have been any Robin whatsoever. You could have just thrown any sidekick there and it would have been, it's just amazing writing. It was an amazing story. Perfection in writing. Sleigh Ride. That was Detective Comics number 826, and so they include it in here too. And then once again, another excerpt from Scott Snyder's run. So you got the Joker, then you've got Robin, And I'm sure this is more like, okay, well, we'll tell you one or two stories from each of the Robins. And so they got Super Sons number 5, Batman Incorporated, they've got Second Chances, which is the origin story of Jason Todd. They've got a bunch of little stories with Tim Drake. And of course, some Teen Titans stuff. Interesting. So these 80-year books make awesome fucking coffee table books, and they're neat to just, so unlike most comics where you're reading it for the story and the continuity, which I'll go on a rant here in just a second about continuity. But you have these books that you read for continuity. These are more of an interesting retrospect. I mean, being 80 years, that's kind of the point, right? Is it's a retrospect. You could pick it up and flip it through and be like, oh yeah, I kind of remember that. Put my earpiece back in. Okay. So, after drinking the Glenlivet, I'm feeling pretty good. Let me take a drink of water here, because I've been talking too much to be drinking whiskey. I got dry mouth. So let's try this Jack Daniel's Tennessee Fire. In fact, let me pour some of my water. Uh-oh, made a little mess. Oh well. Screw it, I'll get it after the stream. Kind of get the taste of Glenlivet out of the glass. Oof. Water and whiskey together, not good. Okay. So now we're pouring the Jack Daniel's Tennessee Fire in the glass. Character Cinnamon Smooth. Oh, that is a lot of cinnamon. Whew. I don't know if I can handle this. I might have to take a small break if this isn't okay. I can handle that. That actually tastes more like the candy than Fireball does. I mean, it does. That actually tastes a lot more like the candy than Fireball does. I can't even taste the whiskey in this stuff, which is kind of dangerous. Like if that's what I was looking to get drunk on, whoo boy. So what other stuff on my shelf is interesting? Look, folks, let me just state this for the record. My intention when I started collecting, my intention was to collect as much as I could from post-crisis, which is 1986, to collect everything I could from that point on, and to have as complete as I could of a library of modern era Batman. And so that's what I've done. I've literally I have as much as I could possibly collect. There are definitely some obscure trade paperbacks out there that have been out of print since since 2004 or whatever. There are a few of those I could still get that aren't part of Batman or Detective Comics or Shadow of the Bat. Legends of the Dark Knight, that series, that run, is almost all out of print. The only one that they seem to be reprinting is Grant Morrison's Gothic. So until we see some of that stuff getting reprinted, I'm not going to be able to collect those. Prey and Venom and Shaman. Like, I've read a lot of these stories online, but the trade paperbacks are just insanely priced right now because they're so hard to find. They've been out of print forever, and DC Comics just refuses to revisit them. Kind of the same thing with anything between 2006 and 2011. Anything DC Comics printed between 2006 and 2011, you're not going to be able to find. I don't know why that is, but like the Red Robin stuff, hard to find. Streets of Gotham, hard to find. They just won't reprint it. But I've done everything I could to collect as much as I could of everything. They've started to recently reprint, what do you call it? See, now I've had drinks. Gotham Knights by Devin Grayson, Gotham Knights run. They reprinted that. There's more to be printed. I've tried to start collecting some of the more obscure Gotham. I think it's called Gotham Confidential. It's this. I've already given a few reviews on some of these. What is it? Let's see. I see again. I've been drinking, so I've Batman Confidential. So like Rules of Engagement. But again, they don't have the whole run collected. So these more obscure but in continuity stuff, I don't have all of that, but I do have almost everything that has been printed or at least reprinted recently in Batman and Detective Comics. So pretty much everything from year one to after Rebirth, with two exceptions. And I'm going to be very clear about these two fucking exceptions. Tom King and the whole wedding debacle and the New York Times and all of that bullshit. I stopped at the wedding. I didn't buy another one of Tom King's issues. I read them online, but I didn't buy a single trade paperback after Batman 49. And so I don't have the second half of Tom King's run. One other gap in purposeful gap in my collection is right here. Oh, you can't see that. But what you see here is New 52, right? And then when you get to about here, that's where the John Layman run of Detective Comics would be. And I had had some interactions with Mr. Layman on Twitter. And quite frankly, I just couldn't bring myself to purchase anything that motherfucker has written. There's also, one other thing I would like to mention. Recently, and even historically, there have been a lot of classic DC comic stories and some recent DC comic stories that have some importance to the continuity that have been written by Mark Waid. Mark Waid is also someone who I've interacted with online and have determined I want nothing to do with anything the man writes, and I will try to avoid supporting his career in any way. So I don't know if they get royalties, if either of those two gentlemen get royalties off of those particular runs of Batman comics or Batman involved comics. But no thanks. I want nothing to do. with anything they have written. So, I've got, and I'm trying to collect more of the Robin runs. I eventually want to start getting more Nightwing stuff. I've got Red Hood and the Outlaws. I need to collect more stuff from New 52, but like I said, primarily anything Batman related from 1986 to 2021 I have on this shelf. Continuity wise. So, I mean, that's kind of my goal here. And I give reviews. The beginnings of this channel, I was actually going to try to review these all one at a time, but that didn't work out. It wasn't a popular format, and what the hell am I going to really say about, other than just read the fucking comic to you, and that kind of got lame. Let's see, what's some other interesting stuff I have on my shelf? I had a previous live stream in which I reviewed this, and I highly recommend, if you want to build a collection like this, start here. This helps break down the eras and how to get started with each era of Batman. It's not very complete, but it does a good job outlining where things start and stop, the jumping in points, things you need to look out for. One thing that I want to throw out there that a lot of Batman comic fans don't seem to realize. So, Bruce Wayne goes away in Final Crisis. Spoiler alert. So when you get to 2006, 2007, or really 2008, when you get to 2008 in the Batman stuff, Bruce Wayne goes away. And a lot of people think that this comic here, Battle for the Cowl, somehow ends with a new Batman being crowned. Not exactly. The comic you're looking for is this one. Batman Long Shadows with the Batman Reborn branding. This is the stuff. Most people don't even know this thing exists. They go straight from this to Morrison's Batman and Robin run, which is also part of the Batman Reborn branding. This is the comic in which Dick Grayson puts the Batman costume on for the first time, well, the second time. But that's it. That's the one where Dick finally agrees to become Batman, and it is one of the best comics of that era. Shout out to Judd Winnick. I don't like some of the stuff Judd Winnick has written. There's a whole run with Scarecrow as a villain that is just god-awful. It is bad. Very bad writing. But Long Shadows, top-notch. He did a lot of the early Red Hood stuff, the Under the Hood and Red Hood The Lost Days. And that was pretty good, but this is the best. This is the best. Right there. So yeah, I actually have a paperback and a hardcover version of this. I bought a hardcover version for exactly the reason I was just telling you a moment ago, in that most people don't know it exists. Because they don't know it exists, and it's harder to find, being from that post-2006 era of Batman, I want to be able to just hand the other copy to somebody. And I may eventually hold some sort of contest here on my channel if someone else doesn't need it before then. Anyway, a little more of this Tennessee Fire. So, shout out to all the good writers who have advanced the story of Batman in positive ways. Cheers. Ooh, that is all over my mustache. So that's it. That's the important parts of my collection. I mean, I also collect some of the Flash. I collect some of the Superman. Although I'm going to tell you, when Brian Michael Bendis took over Superman, I was done. And, of course, the people since then who have written Superman and John Kent, I'm just not interested in any of that. But the Tomasi, Peter Tomasi, is probably one of the best writers DC Comics has had in recent years. And because I'm such a slave to paperbacks, I really don't like hardcovers. I've missed out on the second half of his Detective Comics run because they won't release it in paperback. I'm kind of holding out hope that they eventually will, but I think I might have to bite the bullet and get it in hardcover. But I do have the first couple of trade paperbacks, first couple of volumes, and it's been good so far. Let's see, what other things are important on my shelf? All of the Dark Knight Detective and Caped Crusader volumes. I've given those a shout out on the channel before. Pretty interesting stuff. If you're going to collect Batman Nightfall, start with Azrael, Sword of Azrael, or Azrael Fallen Angel, as this is Azrael Volume 1 Fallen Angel. This has Sword of Azrael in it. Start with Sword of Azrael if you're going to collect Nightfall. Let's see. There's nothing really of note. I mean, if anyone at all down in the comments wants my master reading list, I actually have a master reading guide for how to collect this. I'm willing to share it with anyone. Leave me a comment below if you want that. I'll let you know. So it is, we're past an hour now. Let me go ahead and finish off my whiskey. You know what? This is for you. This is for you. I'm going to cheers to you, the viewer of my show. I don't get a lot of views. I don't get a lot of growth. But I come down here, I log on, and I do this show because the possibility that one person might log in, find this entertaining. So you may have noticed down below the title of the stream, some of these are branded The Patriot Philosopher. These shows, I intend to be way more laid back, more chill, more me ranting about me and my opinion on things in society, instead of going over topics. These are more philosophical discussions or discussions about life. This particular episode was more about me, and I was intending an AMA, but nobody participated. Oh well. We'll do another AMA in the future. But kind of the idea is, I want to be able to connect with you folks. And while I'll have a majority of my shows be about what happened in the world this week and how to think about what's happening in the world and what's happening to us and what's happening in the news and what's happening in pop culture. Every once in a blue moon, I'm just going to dial it back. I'm going to turn the lights down low. This one didn't have the lights low because I wanted you all to be able to see the things I was showing you. But most of the time, these Patriot Philosopher shows, I'll have the lights turned down low. I'll probably be wearing my robe. And we'll just be chill. So be on the lookout. If you don't like these kind of shows, don't tune into any of them with the little Patriot Philosopher at the bottom in the title. But all the other shows will be about news topics and what's going on in the world this week and what's going on in pop culture this month. So stay tuned. These shows are for you, and even if I don't get anybody to watch them, they're still for you. If you're that one person who found this entertaining, if you're that one person who was able to show up and give me a like, cheers to you. Whew. Ooh, that one got up in my nose. I gotta drink a little water, sorry. Oh, my eyes got real big on that one. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you. Feds and degenerates, thank you. Anybody who stopped by, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and close the chat now. Please stop by this Wednesday, 7 p.m. and Saturdays at 4 p.m. Leave a comment below. If there's a topic you think I should be covering and I'm not, leave a comment. Like, share, subscribe, hit the notifications, share this off platform, share it with your friends, family, somebody who likes Batman, somebody who likes pop culture, someone who's angry at the world, somebody who might be a little more libertarian. Share this link with them. Maybe not this link, but share my channel with them and tell them, hey man, I follow this long-haired, hippie, Thor-looking motherfucker on YouTube, excuse me. And yeah, he's real into Batman. He likes to talk on and on and on about Batman, but he also likes to talk on and on about government and things that are wrong with society and how philosophy is more important than statistics. Like, that's my most important lesson that I want to teach people on this channel, is that you can have all the stats in the world, but if your stats are pointing at tyranny, if your stats suggest that tyranny is the answer, no. Just no. There are more important things than statistics, and that is values, morals. Anyway, so that's that. Again, thank you everybody for showing up. I will catch you Wednesday. Hopefully there will be plenty of shit to talk about. From what I understand, there's going to be some interesting conversations happening on other YouTube channels over the next couple of days. We'll see if they create some news. But until then, take care of each other. Take care of yourselves. And don't get any on you. If you do, excuse me. If you do, rub it in real good.